I have a problem, and that problem is a huge pile of shame, a shameful pile of shame. The minimum monthly model payment on that pile of shame is probably about 5 models a day for the next 3 years, so I decided to buckle down and do the responsible thing. I got 2 Christmas battle forces. Yeah, 2022 kind of went off the rails a little bit, but I want 2023 to go better. I want 2023 to be the year I get out of mini painting debt. So I'm setting myself a challenge. An entire army in a weekend, 2 days, starting now. The army I'm gonna paint is a 40 miniature strong Sylvaneth army for Age of Sigmar. Now, is this possible to do in 2 days? Well, I have sort of done this challenge before. I painted a Stormcast Eternals army in a week. So we will see what happens. My plan is day 1 is going to be nothing but base coating. I don't really like base coating, but it has to be done so that day 2 can be nothing but highlighting. Highlighting is my favorite thing to do in all of painting. It's putting on the last little garnish. It's a little bit of oregano, a mint leaf on the corner, and just a big blob of sprinkles on top. It does mean though that today is gonna suck. But tomorrow might be the most fun I've ever had in my entire life, so time to get to work. Now you're probably taking a look at these guys and thinking, yeah, those guys are trees. I know what color trees should be, and I do too. Magenta. At first glance, it might seem like an odd color for these tree elf spirits, but magenta is one of my all-time favorite colors. It has never let me down before, and I am contractually obligated to include magenta in all my miniatures. To start to lay in some lights and darks, I broke out the airbrush. I sprayed some dark brown over the hands and branches. I'm keeping these colors off the faces. I want them to be the brightest spots on the model. I'm trying to make them look as human as possible with paint, and their crazy twiggy silhouettes will show that they are in fact not people but trees. And those 2 conflicting facts battling against each other will make the models more interesting. I sprayed a dark gray over their feet and the tips of their branches to push the contrast further and draw more attention to the faces. And speaking of the faces, I sprayed these with bone color. I also used this on their tushies. Even though I'm working on base coats, I'm doing my best to work in some highlights. These models are spindly with tons of details, and the brighter and more contrasty I can get on the base coat now, the easier time I'll have tomorrow. The bases did not get overlooked in the base coating. I made some patches of green. Every base got about 3 spots, letting the original primer and any other colors that spilled onto the bases stay. It adds some nice variety, which is important for natural looking ground. Then some gold paint. I don't own a gold paint I really like, so I like to make my own. Mixing some silver paint with a drop of orange ink, and I put this on all their weapons and jewelry. I don't know where these trees got gold from, but it does add some nice accents. I have tons of base coats on there, and now it's time to provide a little bit of contrast, and I'm gonna use enamel washes, and I'm very nervous. I've never done enamel washes before. I've done oil paints, but I've never really had much success with oil paints, so I'm sure Streak and Grime is gonna be a great success. This stuff is legendary, or so I'm told. The easiest way to get some nice control over washes. This is either gonna work perfectly or fail spectacularly. I have 500 cotton swabs and some oil rags, so I have everything I need. Oh, it's time to try. Everything got dunked. It probably would have been smarter to try this on 1 mini instead of an entire army, but where's the challenge in that? All right, everything's brown. Time to see if I can actually get this off, or if I'm gonna be having to do some base coats part 2. A cotton swab mixed with a little white spirits definitely pulled the Streak and Grime away, but it did take a lot of work and the cotton swab started shedding pretty bad. I switched to a paintbrush, wiping the model, then wiping the paintbrush clean on a paper towel, and this seemed to work a lot better. I would like to try again with some higher quality cotton swabs. It was really interesting seeing the model turn brown and then see some of the original paint be revealed, but it did take a lot of work. Enamel washes are on there, and I'm in 2 minds about it. I think on the spindly tiny little infantry, it might have been a bad move. It took so much time and effort to get some, as not as much as I would have liked, of the enamel wash off the minis, and overall, they just got really, really dark. It looks a little bit like I put sunglasses on. With that being said though, it's not the worst look. I'd say I'm probably 50-50 on these guys. On the bigger models though, the Tree Lords, I think it did a really, really nice job. I mean, these guys are sort of like vehicles, and vehicles are sort of what these things are made for. But since they have much bigger, flatter areas, I found it much easier to wipe off a lot more of the enamel. And it looks really, really good, just stuck in all the cracks and crevices and the hard to reach spots. So A+ for the big guys, C- on the infantry, but am I still in a good place to finish on time? Yeah, I think so. Getting right back into base coating, all of the tree stuff was done, but half of these Sylvaneth are half tree, half ghost elf. Games Workshop suggests with the box art to paint them light blue, which would have been lovely, but instead I went with yellow. It wasn't much fun painting around all the branches and armor, but it does make these angry tree people pop. All the yellow got an orange wash. This will create a very smooth look, which contrasts nicely with the messy, grungy bark, and that juxtaposition is exactly what I'm going for. On the Dryads and Tree Lords, I went with a blue speed paint for their loincloths, and their little leaves. I did not plan my color scheme out beforehand, but once I saw the yellow, I knew the other accent color needed to be a cold color. Opposites attract when it comes to fun color schemes. All right, that ought to do it for tonight. I got just about all the base coats done, and I should be in a really good spot to finish tomorrow. One thought I did have while working on this is where am I gonna put this army? And luckily, this video's sponsor has a solution. The Jikosi miniature storage case is a great solution to storing and transporting your miniature armies. Yes, armies. This case is huge. It is 18 inches tall, 15.5 inches wide, and 11.5 inches deep. I currently have 17 kill teams in there, and it can hold a lot more. It's made of tough plastic, and it's very strong. Opening it up, you will find 5 metal trays that you can slide in and out, perfect for attaching miniatures that have magnets in the bases. And it's modular. You can put these trays wherever you want inside. You don't have to worry about pinching banners or finding different solutions for taller miniatures. The Jikosi case can hold them all. When closed, you can see your miniatures through the clear window in the front, and it has a handle on top so it can be easily carried to and from your local game store. It ships flat, and then after screwing together 8 screws, 4 in the top and 4 in the bottom, it is ready to rock and roll. If you think the Jikosi miniature storage case would be a good fit for you and your armies, you can follow the link in the description below and check it out for yourself. Day 2, the day this army gets finished, and you know what? I think I'm just gonna go down the line, finishing unit by unit, starting with the Spite Revenants. Except for the base rims not being painted, these guys were pretty much ready to go yesterday, so now I get to make them perfect. I also noticed I forgot to paint their lucky charms. After a little dabbing of gold, I took some bone colored paint and then I began to stipple this on. This scratchy, speckly pattern will be a nice contrast to the smooth as butter and butter colored skin. A few squirts of burnt umber ink blended the new bone highlights into the base coats I did yesterday. It feels like so long ago, but really, it was only a few hours ago. The skin was so much fun to highlight, I have a lot of practice doing this on orcs. But instead of dark green to light green, it goes from orange up through yellow and ending in white. I painted in patches, working each muscle one at a time, making smaller and smaller patches of lighter and lighter colors. I airbrushed some indigo ink over the branches. This dark blue over a dark reddish brown base coat turns almost black. Then I picked out all the leaves with bright blue, and then a highlighting of light blue. Hanging above the bright yellow skin, they really stand out. Then I sprayed a little more green onto the bases and a little green ink over the legs to change the colors a little bit. Pretty much my whole 40k collection has black base rims, but these guys are for Age of Sigmar, so I decided to go with a brown, a nice natural color for these supernatural plants. 5 Spite Revenants completely finished. 40 model army now down to 35 more models to go, and honestly most of those are Dryads, so I barely count those. Really, if you look at it that way, I'm almost done. I probably could have gotten a little bit more work done this morning if I had continued to assembly line paint instead of just focusing on these guys, but I think that is completely offset by the insatisfaction boost I got of actually finishing these models. And I think next I want to work on one of the big figs, Drycha Hamadreth. Actually, you know what? Let me do a little bit of math. Let's say I want to stop working at about 10 o'clock, so divided by 35. Oh, I have to finish a miniature every 15.42 minutes. That's maybe doable. That's maybe possible. I better get to work. Drycha is the hero of this army, an unhinged elf spirit piloting a mech suit made of magical tree and beehives. She's a wonderfully wonky model. I highlighted her skin exactly like I did the Spite Revenants, who Drycha actually gives buffs to in-game. Then I dry brushed the beehives with some white paint to make them more vibrant. Then I highlighted the wood using a bone color. I could have spent all day on her, but it's definitely not necessary to get everything. I focused on the spots that I think would catch the light most. I airbrushed blue over her twigs, claws, and bugs to darken them. Then I airbrushed orange onto her armor near her body. This is a bit of object source lighting. She is the most powerful Revenant unit, so she's glowing extra bright. And I also used these colors on the beehives to turn them a wonderful shade of honey. I used brown ink to blend the highlights into the armor and some green inks on the legs. Drycha is young by tree standards, so a lot of her armor should be youthful and green. Her shooting weapon is a swarm of angry bees, and considering that the Bee Queen weapons and armor is one of my favorites in the video game Terraria, I had to spend a little extra time on these bugs, highlighting the wings from dark blue to blue, light blue, and then white. I highlighted the beehives, some of the yellow from Drycha's skin, and then it was time to finish another model by painting the rim of the base brown. Drycha is finished, well, sort of finished. I'd like to do some fun power swordy things on her claws, but I don't really know how to do that yet. I'm gonna do that on the Spite Revenant swords, and I think it'll be easier to learn how to do it on these. And then maybe at the end, we'll see how much time I have. I might go back and touch up her claws a little bit. But seeing as she took a little bit longer than 15 minutes, I gotta move on. Up next was the Gossamed Archers. I did all the same steps I did on the Spite Revenants, but unique to the Archers are some buggy wings. The blue speed paint from yesterday looks lovely, but I want to introduce some splattery texture, and my favorite way to do this is with the airbrush. I turned my compressor almost all the way down so air is barely moving through my airbrush, then I put in some watery light blue paint and let it spit out. This is a great technique for blood, splatter, stars, dust and dirt, and glittery bug wings. After admiring my work, I fixed up the little base coating mistakes that Yesterday made, then I took some green inks and sprayed it over the bodies of the bugs. Yes, bugs. These aren't actually the Archer's wings, but they're bug BFFs who give them a big hug and carry them through the air. On the eyes, I've been using the oranges and yellows I've been using on the Revenant bodies. These wings are the only painting sub-assemblies I have for this entire army. I peeled off the poster tack, revealing the bare plastic pegs and socket, and that way I can get a perfect, strong plastic glue bond. I know I'll knock these top-heavy models over all the time, so I want to make sure those wings are stuck. 5 Gossamed Archers completed, the deadly Tinkerbells of the Sylvaneth. Now I have 11 models completely finished, and I think before I said this army had 40 miniatures, it actually only has 35. I got a little confused because the Dryads actually come in 16, which isn't quite enough. I guess I could take one squad and then spend a CP to reinforce it to 16. It would have been really nice if Games Workshop sold them in boxes of 10 or 20, but you know what always comes in the correct number of parts? The terrain available on our Patreon. We make brand new terrain sets available to our Patreon supporters every month. This month, our patrons get the Starship Bridge, a grimdark command deck full of stained glass. Perfect for games like 40K, Kill Team, and any other tabletop war game. In addition, patrons get access to extra episodes of EOB, live Discord hangouts, and top supporters can get their name on one of my Black Templar Space Marines. The Dryads made me do math wrong, so I'm gonna paint them next. I also really wanna start getting models off of this table because it feels like there's a lot left, and the evening's getting a little long in the tooth. I still think I can do it, but we'll see how long these Dryads take. I try to work fast on the Dryads. They are the lowliest tier on the Sylvaneth totem pole, so whatever I do, I need to be prepared to do it on maybe 50 to 100 models in my Sylvaneth career. I airbrushed some blue inks over the tips of their branches and their twiggy talons, turning them black. I did some highlights of bone on their faces, chests, and shoulders, working quickly, grabbing one mini after another, doing the same steps over and over. Once I had worked through the pile, I turned the models around and worked through the pile again, highlighting their butts and calves. The bone is bright, but not bright enough. To push the highlights further, I did these steps again with pure white, speed painting through the faces, then speed painting through the butts. Then a dusting of burnt umber ink to blend the white into the wood. Then dripping orange ink into the eye sockets. I wouldn't normally paint eyes on a Horde troop choice, but these models don't have a ton of detail, so I decided to go for it. Then highlighting all the individual leaves with blue and light blue paint, and that is a forest of Dryads I can be proud of. Woo, 16 Dryads done! It feels really good. There's only 8 models left on this table. However, those 8 models include 2 Tree Lords, and I really should knock out these Tree Lords because I have no idea how long these are gonna take. On humongous models like these, it can be hard to know where to even start, especially when you've already been painting for 11 hours. I guess maybe a little airbrushing on the branches. I am loving how the blue ink turns black on the models, and it makes the existing highlights stand out even more. I squirted white paint over some of the symbols on their armor to start to build up a glow. Then I brushed some water over the symbols. The water fills up the cracks and dries on the flat parts. This is key for pin shading with acrylics. I can dip some white ink into these crevices and the paint will flow through the symbol neatly and cleanly. I squirted orange over the symbols, which made a nice looking color, but it did darken the symbols a little more than I would like. I picked out the eyes and then decided to double dip with more white ink in the symbols. After that, I picked out every single leaf with some blue paint. Blue is opposite orange on the color wheel, so this makes my Sylvaneth really stand out. But it did take a long time to paint every single leaf. But it felt really good to paint those base rims brown and finish 2 more huge models. Tree Lords are done! It feels really good to get those big old models out of the way. Now I have 6 models left, and 6 minutes left to get them painted, if I want to stop working at 10 o'clock. But you know, I have a feeling I might kick that can right down the road, and we'll see how far I get by 11. I started the day with some Sylvaneth Revenants, and it feels right to end the day with some more Revenants. I'm glad I didn't leave all these models for last. Now that I know what I'm doing, it's simple to run through the steps. Highlight the armor with bone, highlight the skin with yellow until it glows like the sun, picking out the leaves with blue, and painting the base rims brown. I had plans for doing more with the swords, but it's getting pretty late, and you know what? I'm starting to like the pink colored weapons. Whew, the tree revenants are done. That means I have a single miniature left, the branch wraith. Oh boy, it is not going to be Sunday for much longer, and I am getting this army done in a weekend. One model, half an hour, let's go. The base coats are pretty strong, they just need to be pushed a little further. The branch wraith is a spellcaster who can summon dryads, so I want to make her match. I used bone to add more highlights to her skin and make the face more vibrant. Moving to white highlights, I made the skin brighter still. I picked out the symbols etched into her bark with some orange ink to match the rest of the glowy bits on the army. Now, the model was looking very bright, but not very tree-like, so I glazed on some brown. This made some nice shadows and blended the magical body into the natural wood. With my remaining seconds, I picked out all the leaves, then glazed some magenta into her hair. And with that, it was time to put down the paintbrush. The branch wraith is done. That is the last model. The entire army is finished. Oh, and look at that, I was just under the clock. Holy cow, an entire army in a weekend. I'm going to bed. The Sylvaneth war host is ready to march to war. Drycha Hamadreth leads her armies of soul-infused plants grown from seeds in the realm of life, ready to defend the forests of Aish. Ready to strike down anyone who had the audacity to cut down a tree, pick a flower, or trample over a blade of grass. 2 furious days of painting later, and I now have a completed Sylvaneth army. My goal was to completely get out of Warhammer painting debt, and I have definitely succeeded with just the game Age of Sigmar, but that's good, that is progress. I actually assembled all of these miniatures on Christmas Day, and if I hadn't made the decision to just sit down and get it all done, this project would have stretched out probably over the course of the entire year. But it didn't take that long. It got finished in 2 days. I'm so excited. I'm gonna take these guys, put them in a Jacossi miniature transport case, take them to the local Warhammer store, and get a game of Age of Sigmar in.